Legends and Losers is proud to be sponsored by Oracle NetSuite. Go to netsuite.com/legends. Today, our guest is the incredible Magdalena Yesil. We're going to talk about betting on Mark Benioff, Salesforce.com, and the cloud before anyone else. How Salesforce almost went bankrupt. What it's like to go from an immigrant to a legendary Silicon Valley entrepreneur and venture capitalist. And we're going to get Magdalena's point of view on how smart women win in the new economy. All right. The Ramones said, hey ho, let's go. And that's what we're going to do. Hello, my legendary friends. Man, am I ever glad you're here today. Whew. You know, one of our mantras around here is one real conversation can change your life. And today we feature a very real conversation. And today's episode really sits at the heart of our mission to hack the best minds in Silicon Valley and beyond. And really have a great dialogue, a real no BS dialogue about what it takes to design a legendary life and a legendary business. And man, did we ever capture that lightning in a bottle with Magdalena Yesil. We go deep, and she's as real as it gets. I will give you her whole bio in a second. But her track record as an entrepreneur is extraordinary. And as I mentioned at the top of the episode, she bet on Salesforce and Benioff and the cloud long before anyone ever did. She was the founding board member at Salesforce.com. Now, speaking of pioneers in the cloud, our friends at NetSuite want to help you grow your business. Growth is what every company is striving for. And yet, like everything in life, sometimes when you get what you want, it can make you a little batty. Growth can be incredibly challenging. And so now is the time to embrace the cloud and to re-platform your business on NetSuite. NetSuite is the business management software that handles every aspect of your operations for growing companies like you, from the garage to the IPO and beyond. With NetSuite, you can save time, money, and unneeded headaches managing sales, finance, accounting, orders, commerce, and HR instantly from your desk, your laptop, your tablet, and of course, your smartphone. Check out netsuite.com/legends. And you'll have an opportunity to set up some time with a NetSuite growth expert in your industry, because NetSuite plays pretty much in every industry you can think of. And have a powerful conversation about barriers to growth, opportunities for growth, and most of all, how to manage your growth. So NetSuite is an incredible opportunity for you, and it's available to you at a cost that might be surprising. So check out netsuite.com/legends and set up your free 60-minute growth dialogue today. All right. Now, I need to thank Professor Tina Selig from Stanford. She was our guest on episode 83. I've known Tina for a long time. She was a huge inspiration to me for writing Play Bigger. And I just think she's an extraordinary person in the world who I admire. And she introduced me to Magdalena Yesil. Now, Magdalena is a founder, entrepreneur, and today top venture capitalist. As I mentioned, she was the founding board member and first investor at Salesforce. Prior to that, she was the founder of three incredibly important companies during the early days of the internet: UUNet, Cybercash, and MarketPay. She's also the founder of Broadway Angels, a group of female venture capitalists and angel investors. And she's the author of a spectacular book that's doing very well called Power Up: How Smart Women Win in the New Economy. And to top it all off, very recently, she had two of her companies go public in about a 2-week period. So she's on fire. Here she is, Magdalena Yesil, on Legends and Losers. So when did you know you wanted to be an engineer?
I never knew I wanted to be an engineer. All I knew is I wanted to get a job. So my becoming an engineer was very much a pragmatic decision. I was in college, a pre-med, and my sophomore year, I got a 94 over 100, and I got a C+. And I went to my professor and said, sir, you made a mistake. You gave me a C+ when I got 94 over 100. And he said, no, you are the one who made the mistake, not me. You made multiple mistakes and I grade on a curve, right? So anyway, I was very bummed out, and I went to lunch And there was this guy sitting next to me, and he asked me how I was doing. And I actually decided to tell him how I was doing. I told him I was doing very poorly because I just gotten a C plus on a test. I scored 94 over 100. And he said, "Oh, pre-med is so horrible. Why don't you come and take some classes in the engineering school? We all collaborate. We do problem sets together. It's really a very nice environment. You'll enjoy it." And that's how I took my very first engineering class.
And what spark went off for you with engineering, or maybe let me ask it this way: what was different for you with engineering than medical school?
Oh, totally different. First of all, I loved the environment where you basically did problems together. You had problem groups, highly collaborative. And the second piece I truly loved was the aspect of problem solving was just like puzzles. There was a right answer, and it was like you figured it out. And it was so much more based on logic than sheer memorization like biology was. So you didn't even necessarily need to study that much. Once you knew the basic principles, it was just applying those principles. So it very much fit with my personality as well as my approach to learning.
Interesting. And I've heard you say, and I think right, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know, I've been consuming a lot of your content lately, so you'll excuse me for not knowing which came from which, a talk
Oh,
or
yes, of
your
course.
book.
I'm blown away that you've actually been consuming that content.
Well, listen, it may not sound like it, but believe it or not, I do some homework.
Perfect.
Which is probably embarrassing because it probably doesn't sound like it. But anyway.
No, not at all.
So somewhere I heard you say, or maybe you wrote it in Power Up, but that you really like solving big problems or complex problems or something along that lines. Am I remembering that right, Magdalena?
That is correct. Yes. No, I do.
And so, if you sort of think about it on its face, big problems are a big pain in the ass. So what is it about big problems that attracts you?
I think it's the challenge, right? I mean, if it's a simple problem or a small problem, a lot of other people will solve it. It probably has already been solved, but it's the next generation problem. It's the bigger problem. It's the harder one. And, as you go down your education path, as you get more mature and take more advanced classes, the problems are always harder and harder. So I look at my career no differently than that. As I become more and more efficient, I want to take on the bigger challenges, the bigger problems. That doesn't mean you always get to solve them. Actually, a lot of times you don't. But it's that excitement that what if you do? What if you can actually figure this out? And it takes multiple years. A lot of these companies from right off the bat are definitely not sure things. And a lot of young companies in the technology field fold. So it is a high risk.
Yeah. Now, interestingly about that, I've been thinking about this topic a lot, and sort of this is the thing that's occurred to me, and our guests on Legends and Losers have really been teaching me this. It's a thread I see amongst people who've had a legendary life, which is it's the things in life that we overcome in a lot of ways that are a huge contributor to making us who we are. And in addition to that, the people that we admire and respect are the people who've achieved something. And in order to achieve something, we've overcome something significant that maybe the average person might not dedicate themselves to. So if you take that as a premise, this sort of thought I've been having, Magdalena, is that, and this may sound like a crazy thought, but I'm curious as to your reaction. In some ways, or at least partial ways, our life is a function of the struggles that we choose to embark on.
Or that life throws our way.
Well, yes, sometimes we have no choice, right?
Right.
But
Yes,
I don't
but
know
you're
about the
right.
ones
Sometimes
Go ahead, please.
Sometimes we consciously take on the project, we consciously take on the struggle for whatever reason, because we're curious or because we really do think that if we won at the end of that struggle, we would win big. It could be economically driven, it could be philanthropically driven, it could be just really driven by curiosity, which usually my career has been very much driven by curiosity, kind of never wanting to be left behind, always wanting to be at the front end of things. So I don't stop and say, oh gosh, where was I when that was happening? I know where I am. I'm at the front end. I'm at the leading edge. I'm leading it. And if it's all going to go under, I'm going under with it.
Now, Magdalena, there you said something I found very fascinating. Another sort of topic or idea that I find myself more and more consumed in, which is this notion of curiosity. And our dear friend, the gal who connected us, Professor Tina Selig, with all her work on creativity, of course, curiosity is a big part of what leads to creativity. So I'm curious, could you share more about what you mean by curiosity?
Yeah, always wanting to know what's on the other side. That really is curiosity. Always wanting to know how things are or could be. So I ended up coming to the United States from Turkey. That very much was driven by curiosity. The reason why I wanted to come to the United States was because when I was 10 years old, I found out that the United States sent men to the moon. Now, the only reason why we went to the moon wasn't curiosity. It was also other, major potential finds, lifestyle, eventually metals, whatever it was that was driving the era. But for me personally, it was curiosity. Like, how are these people, how are these Americans sending men to the moon? What kind of people are they? What kind of education are they providing to their students? And can I do that someday? It's that kind of a 10-year-old curiosity that drove me. And that 10-year-old curiosity hasn't really died. It just is, I'm curious about new things, but it always is wanting to poke my nose into something I know nothing about and learn. And that's how I do these startups back to back.
So you're a nose poker?
Yes, nose poker is a good description.
I love it. Now, the interesting thing I find about curiosity, particularly in the domain of business, is when we're curious about something new, particularly something that leads us to an innovation, which ultimately can lead to the creation of a new company and a new category, there's massive risk associated with that, of course, because we don't know where this curiosity leads us to the point we were just on about problem solving. You made the point that maybe the problem's not solvable. And so as somebody who essentially makes bets on the future around topics it sounds like that you're curious about, how do you think about sort of curiosity, startups, and risk? How does that play in your head?
Well, it's oftentimes startups get started because they have a hunch. They have a hunch that it might be a certain way. This industry might act a certain way. This industry might need something that they think they can create. And then as they develop their product, number one, they see if in fact the industry does need that. We call it product market fit. Is there a product market fit? If I can build the product, will there be customers? Will the market want it? How much will the market want to pay for it? So every step of the way, as you're doing a new company, in fact, you are being driven by the unknown, by your curiosity for the unknown. Now, curiosity is being used here, but it's economically driven, right? Because if the market is big enough and if my product fits the market, I can have major economic gains from that. And then every minute step is also very much a discovery. Will this customer buy it? Under what conditions will this customer buy it? How much will this customer be willing to pay for it? How long will this customer have to pilot? So if you really kind of peel the onion back, it is a series of discoveries. And sometimes we discover things that we can actually deliver on. That's success. And sometimes we discover things that we just cannot deliver on, and that's failure.
Well, and sometimes we eat a plant we're not supposed to eat, and it kills us.
That's true
If you
too.
go back to, I've always wondered about, sort of how in how we figured out that, like, okay, don't eat this mushroom, eat that mushroom. Well, of course, Sally ate that mushroom and died.
Right.
So we decided we're not going to do that, right? And in entrepreneurship and venture capital, sometimes Sally dies, so to speak,
Well,
metaphorically.
but unlike the human life, well, if Sally dies and then Molly dies and then Jack dies, we stop eating that mushroom. In the entrepreneurial world, 10 companies can die before you. And that doesn't discourage you from coming in and saying, well, maybe this time I can solve it. Just think of Apple with the Newton product, right? I'm talking multiple decades ago now. The Newton product was the personal assistant, the precursor to the iPhone. The Newton product basically was dead on arrival. It just didn't work. People didn't like it. Its market acceptance was incredibly low. That did not stop technology companies and the very same company itself, Apple, from trying again and again until they got it.
And what I love about the fact that you're bringing up that kind of example, Magdalena, is one of the ahas I've had in my 30 years in this industry is fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
Very true.
So it would have been very easy for Apple to say, hey, look, the Newton didn't work. So, this category is like not something we should go do because it didn't work. We proved it doesn't work. However, if you look at it from a category design perspective, that is to say, problem first and solution, problem first, second, and third, and solution much later. The problem called, how can I use technology to better, organize my life, if you will, or if you experience life, maybe a more powerful way of saying it. That problem, when the Newton failed, didn't go away.
Absolutely. And you hit it, I think, right on the head. It's the problem that we fall in love with, not the solution, because frankly, even a successful solution is taken over. I mean, let's give an example from my life. Siebel Systems brought a great solution to customer management, right? It was a fantastic company, very successful, enabling salespeople to manage their customer base. And then another upstart came in, Salesforce, and took the very same problem but solved it a different way. So the problem might have multiple generations of solutions, and each generation might be successful or might fail, but the problem still exists and can be solved in new creative ways. And by the way, coming back to Apple and the iPhone, then you have the Android operating system saying, I'm looking at it from a different angle. So, and then Samsung takes that and makes it a huge success for themselves. Without having to create their own operating system. So that's why technology is so exciting, and that's why I never have time to watch television, because there's just so much going on. It's
You're
so
not
entertaining.
you're not up to date on keeping up with the Kardashians, Magdalena.
Well, let me put it this way. If there was one show I could watch, it probably would be the Kardashians, because I'm full-blooded Armenian. And they are by far the most famous Armenians. So one of these days I owe it to myself to watch it. But no, I haven't watched it yet.
Well, I never have, and I don't want to insult Armenians by any stretch of the imagination, because I actually, believe it or not, have Armenian friends. But I hate that we live in a world where we have to know who those people are, but that's a whole other conversation.
Well, it's again, it's consumer behavior. We cannot say, oh, this is the wrong solution. In fact, the marketplace, i.e., consumer behavior, has said the Kardashians have a fantastic solution to the consumer's needs, whatever those are.
God, I hope I never have a problem that a Kardashian can solve. But that's a whole other. So let's maybe, you mentioned Salesforce. So how about we go there? I just find the whole journey fascinating. You may be aware in our book, Play Bigger, we showcase Salesforce prominently as a great example of a company that can, in this case, reimagine a category in a completely
Yes.
new way. And as a result of having and I'm going to use these words very much on purpose, a different point of view. Mark and yourself and the rest of the kind of co-creators of Salesforce, particularly in the beginning, educated all of us to think about a problem and a solution around, Salesforce automation, ultimately CRM, in a completely different way. And to your point, Siebel was the fastest growing company in American history for a while. And you guys were able to destroy them, not by competing, but by actually changing the rules in the category. So I would love it, Magdalena. Could you take me back to those early days?
Absolutely. And those early days were very much driven by um, being pragmatic. So what we did know about the market was that Siebel Systems, even though they were a leader and corporations spent multiple millions of dollars to license the software, and then on top of that, multiple millions of dollars for integration, oftentimes the ultimate corporate consumer was not really happy with the product because it was quite difficult to use. Another observation we had made was that most co- corporate consumers were using only about 20% of the functionality. So even though the product was very robust, it had a lot of functionality, for most of its consumers in different corporations, the 80% of the functionality wasn't really that important. And they really were paying a high price for that additional 80% that they very seldomly used.
Well, and
So
I can
what
tell you as a CMO of a company that bought Siebel, it was virtually unimplementable, even in the
right.
2000s. Um,
Yeah, actually, part of our sales strategy was to go see who signed up with Siebel, paid their enterprise license, and then was unable to bring up the product after spending millions on implementation. So those were great target customers for us because we were coming in saying no license fees and no implementation necessary. It was truly a great way of selling software. And the whole concept of no software early on, if you remember that campaign that
of course.
Salesforce ran, even though people would say to me, what do you mean by no software? It is software. And we'd say, yes, software, but really delivered in a very different way. It doesn't look like software to you. It's just a service to you.
Can you take me behind the creation of the, if you will, no software point of view that really the company still uses to this day?
Yeah, so really there were two components to it. One was no implementation, no licensing fees, because that was the big gorilla that corporations were struggling with. And the second was no contract, no commitment. So when you bought Salesforce in the very early days, you bought it on a monthly basis. It was, pay by the drink, pay as you go. You don't have any commitment, no 1 year contract, no 2 year contract, no upfront payments. So those were the two pieces of the equation. Of course, over time that changed for very good reasons, but the initial no software concept was that we were basically negating those two pieces that were so integral to enterprise software selling.
And, in my career, Magdalena, I've been at companies as a CMO and I've helped companies in all sorts of different capacities. And what I know is when you have an incredibly different point of view that has the potential to, in this case, um, uh, reset the agenda in a giant category such that you make it your own, which is what I think you and Mark and the team did. That can be a very challenging thing. And B, making the point of view simple so the world gets it is one of the hardest things any entrepreneur, any founder, any venture capitalist, and anybody involved with these kinds of startups or big innovations can do. And so and the other thing I'm curious about is like, how do you get this big idea called, hey, we're going to run in the cloud, we're going to be paid by the drink, we're going to run it in our data set, the whole thing, which is a very big argument that you're making back in the late 90s about the future of software that is brand new and a 180 from where everyone else is. How do you have the genius to synthesize that whole big message, that whole big idea into those two words?
Well, so even though in hindsight it sounds like it was a huge leap, it actually was a bunch of baby steps. Because let's face it, no matter how big of a thinker we are, the implementation is done one step at a time. And the one step at a time really came from two things. Number one, the concept of ASPs, I don't know if you remember those, was
I
already,
sure do.
yes. So the ASP concept had already been kind of out for a while. There just was no one doing it successfully. But the idea of not really asking companies to buy enterprise software, but to actually provide it as a service wasn't completely foreign, wasn't completely new. And the second piece was that we started, if you remember, during the dot-com boom. So even though this was a very new concept, we were taking the very new concept to very new companies who didn't have a whole bunch of budget. The VCs were funding these dot-coms, and then the dot-coms were our customers. In fact, the hardest days of Salesforce was when the dot-com bust happened, and most of our customers died because VCs stopped funding them.
And I've heard you, again, you'll forgive me if it's writing or talking, but uh, communicating about how those early days were a real challenge, how nobody wanted to fund the company because it was so
Correct.
radical. Could you maybe unpack some of that for me?
Yeah,
Early
and it's actually just amazing because in those days, I'm the founding investor and founding board member of Salesforce, but I also, at the very same time, was a general partner, or was a partner, I should say. I wasn't a general partner at the time, at US Venture Partners. And USVP is a traditional, a Silicon Valley venture fund. And initially, I thought, of course, my fund will invest in Salesforce. I already serve on the board. I've been there from day -1. I know everything that there needs to be known for diligence. And I'm bringing this in after putting in my own money. So obviously, I believe in it so much that I've invested my own cash, and I wasn't that wealthy. So, it was a significant amount of money for me that my venture fund, of course, will fund this. And they didn't. And not only did they not fund it, no one else, all my friends, everyone who was a VC that I had in my social network turned us down over and over again. So
And even with
institution,
your incredible network, sorry to cut you off, but I'm fascinated
yeah,
by this. Obviously, at that point in your career, you have a great network. You're a former entrepreneur and executive at a well-known firm. Mark is a high-profile executive
exactly.
at Oracle, and so I got to believe at that point in time. What year would this be?
So I'm talking about 99
Yeah.
and then 2000. And then, of course, it continued. I mean, Salesforce course, unfortunately, never, or fortunately, was never able to raise a penny of venture capital. So, but when we first started looking, it was 99 and then 2000 and then 2001. And, we looked multiple rounds, and multiple rounds ended up being all personal investments.
And so there was no top tier venture capital in Salesforce, right? Am I
Or
right?
bottom tier for
Or
that
bottom
matter.
tier. No middle tier, no shit
No, no
tier,
tier,
no
no
tier.
tier.
It was all tiers.
Everyone said no.
And,
Everyone
and
said
why
no
is
to it.
it, listen, I mean, obviously you and I don't know each other. We're getting to know each other now. But like I said, I've consumed enough of you. I know enough of who you're connected to. You and I are one degree of separation. Obviously, Mark's reputation and track record speaks for itself, even pre Salesforce. And so I'm curious, in the 99 era, before things blow up, if you say about late
Yeah.
2000, 2001, that makes a total sense because the dot-com had blown up. But in those go days where, everybody was like throwing parties and smoking pot and having a great time and making billions, why couldn't the two of you incredibly successful, charismatic, thoughtful, visionary people get Sand Hill Road to pay attention?
Well, the business model made no sense to Sand Hill Road. The business model basically said corporations are going to give us their most valuable data, and that is their customer data, to us, a no-name startup with two, yes, fairly well-known people, but then we are going to host that data. And VCs over and over again said, "Are you kidding? Like, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
That's the corporate jewels. Why would they ever give it to you?"
Well,
They were
and the
one
other
of
thing
two
I love about it
companies.
is not only did you have the customer data, you had all the salespeople. So you had all their salesperson data. And of course, you had their
Right,
forecast. And,
right.
people today may not realize, but if you think about 99, 2000, even 2005, the notion that you would go into a corporate CIO of a Fortune 500 company and say, now listen, you're just going to give us all this data. It won't be on your data center. It won't be in your data center. You won't do any security. You won't have any of the backups. We'll just do all that for you. At that point in time, that sounded like pure insanity, did it not?
Absolutely. And that's one reason why we never went to the corporate CIOs. The corporate CIOs is not where we sold. We sold at the grassroots level. It was sales early on, it was salespeople getting this directly themselves using their own personal credit cards on a monthly basis and then expensing it. So we wanted to be very much under the radar of the CIO's office because we would be stopped. But it was such a useful tool. The sales folks really took advantage of its simplicity that they were going to use it. We knew they were going to use it, regardless. And as we developed, of course, we became much more of a enterprise sale. But early on, it was very much self-service, and we sold through telesales. We did not have feet on the street calling on the corporate C-suite. We were selling it directly to the salespeople
Well,
who are
and
going to use it.
Mark spent time in the inside sales group at Oracle, did he not?
Correct. That's where he started his career. Yep.
And so, isn't it interesting? You may have seen we had Doug Merritt on Legends and Losers, and he was in
Yes.
inside sales at Oracle. And so, and of course, Tom Siebel famously ran that organization. And
Right.
so it's just fascinating, sort of the cast of characters who were in inside sales at a fairly early, or, in some of the, if you will, the glory days of Oracle. Not that they're not having some glory days today, but it's just interesting that there's a cadre of folks who were in that group who have gone on to do truly legendary things in the tech industry.
Yeah, and it just shows, that it was actually probably a great environment. These guys learned from each other. Tom Siebel was actually their boss, right? And he taught them certain things. So what they did was they took all of that and then took it to the next level.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if we go back to those days, there's this sailing expression that hold fast, right? Where the ship's in a lot of trouble and we're taking on water and there's a storm and hold fast, right? And so if you go back to those early days where you're having a hard time getting the company funded and the dot-com boom blows up, um, can you take me to some of those days and what that was like?
Well, it was ugly. It was no fun because, the worst part of it all was our customer base dying. We went, so 99 and 2000 were good years. Even though we couldn't raise venture capital, we had great momentum forward on first building the product, then getting the product validated in the marketplace. Remember earlier I was talking about product market fit? We had fantastic product market fit. So it was very, very uplifting.
And
But then
when you
when,
started to get that momentum, how much money had the company raised from kind of friends and family?
oh, I want to say probably under 20 million, probably in the teens.
And it was
So we'd
primarily
raised good,
individuals.
all individuals,
Yeah,
correct.
incredible.
Yes. And that's where the network came in, right? So we couldn't get the money from VCs, but we could get the money from friends and family. So this is where the personal network kicked in.
And do you
Um,
think, Magdalena, that having a broad network of folks who invested in the company, do you think that made a difference in the beginning?
we think so. Absolutely. We think so. We had good advocates.
Right.
At the same time, some of those people who were investing were actually also users of the product in their companies. So, the early entrepreneurial fabric of Silicon Valley was willing to invest, same as today's angel investors. But unlike today's startups where they get money in the, 30, 50, $100,000 chunks, we were getting money in the $1 million chunks. So we didn't want to have too many investors because that's a headache to deal with. But we had good investment, size, and we had a pretty diversified set of personal investors.
So even though the Rolodex didn't pay off in terms of getting VCs into the boat, it sure did in terms of getting friends into the boat.
That is very true.
And
Yes,
you
and
had the
those
right
friends
kind of
are.
friends.
Yes, yes. We had the right kind of friends who were willing to take a risk with us. Not all of our friends did, by the way, but enough of them. And then, of course, those people have become even better friends now because
I
we're
bet
making
they
a lot of
have.
money.
Yeah, well, they probably own vacation homes that they've nicknamed the Magdalena. Um,
Well, I
now,
hope they're still holding on to their stock.
oh God, that would be incredible. Now, I must ask you. Now, I could already tell. You're a much nicer person than I am. But were I in
I
your
don't know
shoes,
about
well,
that.
I think, well, we'll see. Were I in your shoes, as the Salesforce Tower becomes the largest building west of the Mississippi, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
So as this thing's going up and you're moving in and all that's happening, right? Were I in your shoes, there'd be a big part of me that would have my middle finger up going, hey, F you, everybody who said no. Sand Hill Road, all you assholes, like Neener Nonner showed you, right? There'd be a big part of the punk rock warrior smash mouth attitude that I couldn't help but have from time to time because you had a tremendous amount of detractors and obviously a lot of people who said no, that this was crazy. And here you are, one of the most important technology companies ever founded.
Well, I grew up in Europe, so the one thing I learned before anything else was good manners. So
See, I told you
I
you were a
am.
nicer person than I am.
So I think that this is not the first time I have proven the masses wrong. Actually, the very first time that happened was even more substantial, and that was with a company called UUNet. When Dan Lynch, my co-founder in my very first company, and I were trying to establish a commercial internet access company, we had the same experience. None of the VCs, this is when internet access was still limited to the domain of universities and government and military. And
CompuServe was out at that point, was it not?
say that again?
CompuServe was out and going when you founded UUNet, was it not?
Yeah, so I'm not one of the founders of UUNet. I'm the
But
founder of a company that we folded into UUNet. But
yes.
yes, you're correct. They
But
were.
at the time,
Um,
CompuServe was not on the internet. It was a private, we used to call them, I don't know,
they had their own private network.
right. It was called a bulletin board, was it not?
Right, exactly. Well, bulletin boards are a little different. Bulletin boards were basically content sharing, and CompuServe had their own private network.
Yeah.
Most corporations had very little as far as networking was concerned, but when they did, they were their local area networks and their wide area networks, but they were all privately operated. They were not the public internet.
And of
And
course, the first email address I had on what you could maybe think of as the internet was a CompuServe address. And of course, it
there
was
you
just a
go.
bunch of numbers.
Yes,
And in the beginning, if you and I weren't both on CompuServe, we couldn't exchange email, right?
correct, because it was a
A
private
private,
network.
right. And then I
Right, it
remember
had
that it
no
was a big
public.
day when CompuServe finally got on the internet and they changed your email address. And now my email address was like 4537, et cetera, et cetera, at CompuServe.com. That was like a big day, right?
It was a big day. It
And
was a
so,
very big day.
and
Yeah,
people forget that just the simple notion of how do I literally get on the internet, that was a big problem that you went to go solve.
exactly. And again, it was one of these environments where none of the VCs would believe that this would happen. They felt that what we wanted to do was buy the nonprofit internet access companies, or operators, I should say, because they weren't companies, from universities, and then put them all under one umbrella. We already had a deal done at Stanford with Barnett. Barnett was the internet access provider. Anyway, long story short, the VCs did not believe in this vision. They felt that internet access would remain in the nonprofit and government realm. So when it all happened, I remember I was sitting next to a guy by the name of Andy Radcliffe at a conference,
He was
and
the co-founder of Benchmark, was he not?
correct. And he was, but this is before Benchmark. This was in his earlier firm. And Andy looked at me and he said, we were talking about internet access, and it had already become commercialized. And Andy said to me, "How do you feel about it?" And he said, "You must feel like you're the smartest person in the room because you were trying to do this before anyone else." And I said, "I just feel good about it. I don't know about smartest person in the room. I just had the right bet and others didn't." So the point I'm trying to make is Salesforce is not the only and first time I experienced this where I had a bet, I had a hypothesis that was very much against the common wisdom. And it turned out that we were very much at the leading edge, and we proved the world wrong and we proved ourselves correct. And it's a great feeling. That's
Neener
why I
Noner.
want to continue doing problem solving.
I just did the Neener Noner for you. Now,
uh,
remind me, so UUNet was acquired by MCI, was it not?
Correct. MCI WorldCom, correct.
Yeah, and back when
After it went public in 94, and then it got acquired.
and then what was your market cap after first day of trading? Do you remember, Magdalena?
No, I don't.
What was the purchase price that MCI WorldCom paid for the company?
That I don't remember either. I don't remember these things. I mean, I don't even remember how
But
much
these were
money
billion
I
dollar
made.
outcomes, were they not? I mean, I remember them
Yeah, of course
billion
they
dollar
were.
outcomes. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Multi-billion dollar valuation. Maybe 4 billion. I can't remember, but something like that. But I move on. Like I solved that problem a long time ago. So I don't really think. Maybe when I'm much older and I'm doing a memoir, I'll go back and try to figure out and remember what all the numbers were. But I'm on to my fourth startup. I'm solving another problem. So that's what I'm laser focused on right now. And that is bringing technology to the auto finance industry. And Power Up, I don't talk much about it in the book Power Up, How Smart Women Win in the New Economy, but I close, the epilogue is about my new startup and how I'm spending my days today.
When you say your new startup, do you mean your venture fund, or what do you mean your new startup?
No, I'm back to an operating role. I'm an entrepreneur again. I
Are
left
you
that
100%
comfortable
out of,
life.
that's what you're doing full time?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I work 12 hours a day.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize. So you're not doing any active investing?
I'm part of Broadway Angels. I'm one of
Yes.
the founders of Broadway Angels. But in reality, the answer is no, I'm not really doing active investing. I'm active in running my own little company and looking at investments here and there, but I would not be the advocate of an investor. I might be putting money in if someone else advocates for it and I decide I should invest.
And so, what compelled you to say, I'm going to, at least for a period of time, put my investor jersey over here and put my entrepreneur operator jersey back on after, a considerable time not being a founder startup of a startup?
Yeah. So I think two things. Number one, curiosity and seeing a problem that really needs to be solved. And number two, realizing no one's working on it. At least no one in my circles is focused on it. If you have bought a car, especially a used car, you know that it's not the most pleasant experience. And then if you try to finance a used car, the experience is even inferior to buying a used car. So financing a used car is really a painful consumer experience today. And if you ask 100 people, probably 98 of them will say, yes, it's a painful experience. Why should we not, as technologists, bring all that we know in making a consumer experience very transparent, easy, enabled from your smartphone? So, seeing a problem that hasn't been solved basically got me off my rocking chair of being an investor
You
and
don't look
back
like
into
somebody who spends a lot of time on a rocking chair.
let's face it, life as an investor is much easier than life as an entrepreneur. As my old partner used to say, investors, their company in the portfolio doesn't do well, they have to shut it down. They just have a bad day. Entrepreneur, you need to shut down your company. You have a bad decade.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
pain is significantly disproportionate, but also the glory and joy is significantly disproportionate as well.
And so, was it the problem that got you off your rocking chair, or are you just off
Yes.
your rocker completely?
Both, both. First of all, you have to be off your rocker to be an entrepreneur, period. I think, most people who are rational would look and say, hey, do you really want to do that to yourself? But also the size of the problem and the number of people who are affected by it. Let's face it, the automobile, the auto purchase is the largest transaction most people will have in their lives in America because a lot of our people who live in our country are not going to be homeowners. That's the socioeconomic reality of the United States today. So the auto purchase is the largest purchase they'll ever make. And getting financing for that purchase is a black box today. So if I do nothing else between now and when I die, but make a dent in that problem, I will be very satisfied.
And what is it about that problem that compels you so much?
It touches everybody. And the more needy you are, the worse you get treated. It is truly outrageous. I am a capitalist. I love the capitalistic approach to life. But in our country, our credit score determines what kind of financing we can get. The poorer we are, the more expensive it is for us because we're in a higher risk category. And therefore, if we can help the financing companies, if we can help the banks reduce risk and still give the consumer a compelling rate and make that financing experience one where the consumer doesn't feel that they have been degraded in the transaction, that is a novel cause. And I am, fully committed to make it happen.
How exciting. I love it. Now, if we go back to those moments in your career, Magdalena, where, there was significant struggle, I've heard you talk a lot about sort of you and Mark sweating Salesforce. Um, how is it that let me take a step back. I'm always fascinated by these moments of truth in our lives, of severe adversity, and what human beings choose to do in those defining moments of truth. And so I'm curious, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, how you think about those, if you will, hold fast moments where it feels like the shit's hitting the fan, the boat's about to blow up, we're in this horrible storm, we might not make it. What is it about you that enables you to persevere in those moments when so many others don't?
So I am full-blooded Armenian, as I said earlier, and I come from Turkey. I grew up in Turkey. And in Turkey, there is this amazing tradition that when someone is departing on a long journey, the family and friends and neighbors all get together and come for the send-off with buckets of water in their hands. And as the person is leaving, they throw those buckets of water after them. And the water is to signify the ability to flow and reach wherever your destination is. So basically, it's a send off that says, may you flow like water and may you get to where you want to go. When I was coming to the United States, the very first time for my freshman year, I had that experience where my family and friends threw buckets of water behind me. And I've used that imagery in my life over and over again. And the nice thing about the imagery is that water, when there's a boulder in front of it, has a way of going around it or sometimes flowing under it. But you can't stop water. It'll always flow. And when I face monumental no's in my career, monumental boulders in my career where it's a roadblock, there's no way we can continue in the way we thought we would. So we have one of two choices. You can either stop. That's not what the water does. You can flow around the boulder. You can flow around the roadblock. That's what water does. So I've always approached my career as one of when there is a major roadblock, when we are really facing such a catastrophic situation, how do we go around it? How do we find a way out? Because I truly believe in my heart and in my mind that there's always a way around it. There's always a solution. We might not end up exactly where we wanted. We probably will not end up where we wanted because we're changing course a little bit. But we're going to move forward. We're going to get to the other side somehow.
And in those moments, what I'm very curious about is how do you, if you will, to use a corny phrase, how do you keep the faith? Because in the early days of any new category, new company, new technology, particularly in ones that you've been involved with, where much of the world is saying, not only no, but they're saying, hey, this is freaking stupid. Right. I mean, it's a very loud and you're
right.
sort of a dumbass for doing this kind of a no. Right.
Right.
It's not just I'm not interested. It's I'm not interested in. What do you mean rent software?
You're going to fail.
What do you mean
yes.
internet access, et cetera? Right. You're like an idiot. And
right.
so,
Absolutely.
How do you keep the faith in the face of very little evidence for the future that you're designing?
Well, that's, I think, where self-confidence comes from. That's when you walk out of that meeting and all the VCs, the 12 guys around the table are looking at you and saying, you're just an idiot. There's no way to go solve another problem. I remember being told many times, how come a smart woman like you is making such a dumb decision? And when you're told that over and over again, you walk out and you say, well, they got the first part right. Yes, I'm a smart woman. They got the second part wrong. This is not a dumb decision, and I'm going to prove them wrong. And in fact, the more people tell you you're off your rocker, the more people tell you you're wrong, the more motivation I feel of proving them wrong. And usually what I want to do, I'm so excited about, if it works, it's going to be so great. I mean, same with this auto financing company. If we're successful, first of all, you can make incremental, positive movement forward. But if we solve these problems, it's going to be so great, it's worth taking the risk. It might take longer. It might be a little different route. So I think keeping the faith is waking up every morning refreshed, leaving all your anxieties to the nighttime, your nightmares, your anxieties, all your fears, which I feel, I mean, I'm not at all immune to any of that. But every morning I wake up fearless. I might have a horrible night. And, one example is, in fact, when we were at we were facing bankruptcy with Salesforce, and I
How
was
close did
working.
you get? I'm sorry to cut you off. How close did Salesforce
Well,
get
we
to
had
going
a
bankrupt?
we had a really negative cash flow of anywhere between $1.5 million per month, and we had less than $5 million in the bank. So we were going to run out of cash very quickly. And the VCs had been turning us down over and over again. So, I've spent several is too small a number. I spent many sleepless nights, and just running through different scenarios, different solutions, what if cases, and ultimately came up with one that worked. But it's those sleepless nights that you never let affect your mood during the day, because every morning you need to wake up fearless.
And I've heard you tell the story, but I would love to hear you tell it again. What was that aha in the fearless nights? And if I remember correctly, you were started banging around on spreadsheets, and
Correct.
you were trying to find a way out of this cash flow, uh,
Exactly.
Harry
Yes.
Carey the company was facing down,
Well,
right?
so right. I mean, so you're burning money and you're not getting, investors are turning you down. So if that's your situation, where can you get cash? Because the one thing for sure is, even if you reduce headcount, you're still going to continue burning cash. So my aha moment came from doing, playing with spreadsheets to see if we could go from the no contract approach, which I talked about earlier, to actually asking our customers to sign contracts with us and giving them a discount for a upfront payment. So if you were paying us X number of dollars a month, how about you commit to a 1-year contract, and we give you X times 12 minus a discount as your total contract price, and then you pay that upfront. We collect upfront.
And
That
and it
would bring
sounds like a
cash to
crazy idea. It's like, well, what? You want me to pay you in advance for a year of software that I don't own? I don't have my data. You have my customer information, my salespeople information, my forecast information. And on top of all that craziness, you want me to pay in advance for some company I've never freaking heard of. That was the idea, right?
Well, no, it wasn't. It wasn't that they had never heard of. Now, this was
I'm
customers.
exaggerating for
Yeah, yeah,
effect, but
yeah. So in fact, what happened was we realized how much our customers really loved the software, that over 50% of them converted to contracts. They actually really wanted the software. They knew they were not going to kick it out. So paying up front and getting a discount, some of them signed up for multi-year
and
contracts.
did they have a sense at the time for how much potential trouble the company was in?
No,
Yeah, you
no,
guys were
because
good
if
at
they gave us the money, we wouldn't be in trouble. The
just give us
trouble
the
was
money and
only
everything will be fine.
transitionary. The trouble was only transient, because of the moment in time that we were caught with a cash flow. So the company, in fact, like I would have said, no, the company wasn't in trouble at all. We had great customers. Customers loved us. So it was just a cash flow issue.
And what was Mark Benioff's reaction when you suggested that
Well,
we do
so
this?
he was, so his initial reaction was, are you kidding? Like, I have been advocating for no contracts. That's part of our mantra. That's actually part of no software. Like that's what we stand for. So this is just, our customers are going to just slap us in the face and say, no way. And he was very resistant. He felt this was a very bad idea, not a good idea. But what changed his mind, and he's the CEO, what changed his mind was going to the salespeople and presenting this to the sales folks who were the closest to the customers and saying, hey, do you think the customers will actually buy into it? Well, unbeknownst to us, the sales folks had already been talking about potential contracts. And so the sales heads said, absolutely, we're cool with it. We think our customers will go for it. And that's really what made the transition.
And you folks prove something that I love and something I try to share with entrepreneurs all the time, which is the best venture capitalist in the world is a customer.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. I cannot believe in that more with every single cell of my body. I always tell entrepreneurs, don't spend your time talking to investors, spend your time talking to your customers, because investors can't save you, but customers can. And this story from Salesforce is a great example of that.
Well, and you folks proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, she who brings in the customers calls the shots.
Absolutely. No question about it. And to this day, Salesforce is a very sales-oriented company. The salespeople are king and queen. And the reason for that is they're closest to the customer. In fact, it's the customer who is king and queen. A lot of Salesforce ads have focused on customers. And it's because ultimately the customer is the most important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Now, you've written this book that just came out recently, Power Up, How Smart Women Win in the New Economy. What possessed you to want to write this book, Magdalena?
So the Ellen Powell Kleiner Perkins case that basically created this environment where a lot of the younger women started saying, well, technology is really very harsh to women. Women don't have equal opportunity to win, to be successful, to have fulfilling careers. And we don't even really want to attempt to go into technology related fields. I started hearing that more and more, and nothing can make me sadder than women opting out from a field which I feel holds amazingly exciting jobs, amazing opportunities. So the only reason why I wrote this book is to show through my own career, as well as the 27 other women that I interviewed for the book, even though we're anecdotal examples, we're not statistically significant, there is and there will be many opportunities for women to be successful in technology or technology-related fields, just like these women have. And we have learnings that we want to share with the younger generation. I feel that now I'm at a place in my career that I have an obligation to the next generation to teach them, to share with them, to give them advice when they want it, so that they can learn from my experiences and they don't have to shy away from this amazing industry that the whole world is watching.
So I have some specific questions for you about the book, but before we go there, I guess my meta question is, I can relate to that feeling of wanting to give back very, very much. That's my motivation for my book, and that's certainly my motivation for Legends and Losers. I'm curious, even though I understand my own motivation in this regard, I'm curious for you to sort of maybe explain to me a little bit more about why you're so motivated to give back, and particularly to give back to younger, next generation women.
I don't really think of it as giving back. I think of it as doing something I truly enjoy. I only do it because I get great joy and fun out of it. It's very satisfying to me. If someone can benefit from it, it's great. That's what I want. But I actually love the process of sharing my experiences, just like I'm doing right now. And I also love having women around. I spent my whole career pretty much being the only woman in the room, in the company, in engineering environments, then venture capital environments. And I truly enjoy having camaraderie of other women. And I do want it to be different in the next 10, 15, 20 years of my career. I want to have more women around.
And I got to ask you, how does it feel for you today, being acknowledged as, and different people use different terms, for you, that you're an icon, that you're a pioneer. I love the term grand dame because there's something majestic about that
Something
to me.
grand about it.
Something
Yes.
grand about grand dame. And so, you are one of the grand dames of venture investing and really of tech entrepreneurship. And so, as someone who was a young person fighting for their place, and as you mentioned, often the only woman around, you had this scrappy early part of your career, and now all of a sudden, so to speak, you're the grand dame. What's that feeling like for you today?
I'm still scrappy. I think that I'm no less scrappy than I was 20 years ago. I still doubt myself. I still need to prove myself. I still wake up with the same level of energy. I never take anything for given. On the other hand, I feel really great joy from being recognized as an early leader. One of the things that I feel I didn't do enough of in my career is to be a role model. We all need role models. As a young woman in technology, I really didn't have female role models. And I wish I had become more of a role model. I had acknowledged my gender earlier, because I ran through my career until now kind of not acknowledging my gender. And until I wrote a op-ed and that USA Today picked up, coming out as coming out as a woman in venture capital, I really kind of had pushed away the fact that I was female. But being female and talking about it, I think enables younger women to say, hey, if she could do it, I can do it.
So in the book you write, I love this headline: better a bitch than a victim.
Correct.
So can you unpack that for me? I love that.
Yeah. So listen, I think there's nothing worse in life than feeling like a victim. It just is no fun. You don't feel good about it. And when you don't feel good about yourself, you cannot do your best work. It's a horrible feeling. So I also know that the word bitch is one that's used basically to manipulate behavior. If someone doesn't want you to do something you're doing, by calling you a bitch or by calling your behavior a bitch, they have great ability to actually manipulate you. No one wants to be a bitch. If you call me a bitch, I'll feel badly and I'll probably stop doing whatever I was doing.
See,
But in fact, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I find that so fascinating because in my career, particularly when I was younger, but still to this day, when somebody says something like that about me, my attitude is go fuck yourself.
Did you grow up in New York?
No, I grew up in Montreal, Canada, but
Okay.
I
Well, you
don't
got
know if
that
I was
East Coast strong personality.
well, and I don't know if it was the circumstances I grew up in or just the Scottish bloodline or what it is, but it's like, yeah, go fuck yourself. And by the way, I'm going to break your face on the way, right? Like that stuff empowers me more, and particularly when somebody, I think, treats me, or even as I've gotten older, others unfairly. If I see somebody who treats others unfairly, oh boy, do I ever have it out for them.
That's great. Well, most women don't have that. Most women, when they are told something that's negative, instead of coming at that person face on, will try to change themselves. Will try to say, oh, what I did was offensive. Let me not do that. And that's why the word bitch is so powerful. No one wants to really be a bitch. Most women don't want to be a bitch. Most women want to be liked.
Can I tell you a quick story about this?
Yes.
So I'm married to an extraordinary woman who doesn't suffer from this situation.
Very
And
good.
Far from it. And yesterday, she's one of her absolute best friends is here visiting for a few days, so we're having a great time. And yesterday, we got on our bikes and we went to go pick up a burrito at our local burrito place. We live in Santa Cruz, California. It's very beautiful here, and we get around mostly on cruiser bikes. And secondarily, what you should know is that there's a law in the county of Santa Cruz that says if there's not a bike lane, the bike takes the whole lane. So we're a very bike-oriented community. Anyway, yesterday we're going to get our burritos, and there's a bunch of tourists in town and all this stuff over the weekend, blah, blah. Anyway, so Carrie and her girlfriend are not able to use the bike lane, so they're in the lane. And this guy honks at them to get out of the way. Now, clearly not from Santa Cruz. And so my wife starts screaming at him to go fuck himself. And he starts to mouth off back. She challenges him. She says, "Oh, yeah? Get out of your car. You want to have this conversation with me? Get out of your car." And, of course, the guy, is terrified and walks away. And I'm not suggesting that people should try to escalate fights with people in cars, but it just shows you the difference in attitude among some people.
Well, she's definitely in the minority, because I do think that the ability to say, well, too bad for you if you disagree, I'm correct, oftentimes doesn't exist, especially when someone, a female, is given a negative adjective like bitch, bitchy woman. So the reason why I say better a bitch than a victim is because if you have the alternative of being called a bitch, or feeling like a victim because you really felt you were doing the right thing, but you changed your behavior because you were given this negative feedback, stick with it, with whatever you were doing.
Yeah.
Don't go to the victim place. Be more like your wife. Stick up for what you believe in, and do it in such a way that, in fact, you are going to convince others over time. It doesn't have to happen right away, but if you think you're in the right, stick with it. Don't back down.
Now, there's so many great things in your book. You make a distinction between coaches and mentors and sponsors. Would you mind kind of underscoring some of your thinking on that for me, Magdalena?
Yes, I wrote a chapter on this. I feel that especially a lot of young women have been told that if they have a mentor in their career, it's the most important thing they can do for their own advancement. And if they cannot find a mentor, they're missing out a lot. And yet, when I interviewed these 27 women, I realized that most of them did not have mentors in their careers, but they had people who believed in them, and oftentimes those were bosses. And those bosses would benefit from that woman's success. And therefore, I differentiate between a mentor, which I think is more of a benevolent relationship where the mentor is giving and the mentee is receiving, to a sponsor. A sponsor is someone, in my mind, who has a symbiotic relationship with you. They are sponsoring you they're sponsoring your success. But if you are successful, they'll get something out of it. Just like a department head, a boss, someone, a board member, someone who is going to benefit, become a direct beneficiary if you are successful. And instead of looking far and away for a mentor outside your industry, you're a lot better off looking for a sponsor within your company, or if you can't find that within your industry, because a sponsor is so much closer to where your work environment is, they probably can add a lot more value than just being a sounding board.
Well, and what I love is you say your first sponsor is your boss, and you've created this mental architecture to think about this that I think is so powerful. That a sponsor is somebody who stands to gain from your success,
Yes.
And obviously, if I work for you, then and I do good work, that reflects positively on you. And so I think that's a very powerful thing. And one of the reasons I wanted to underscore it with you was, I don't know, I'd be very curious to your take on this. Most people have it all upside down backwards in terms of how they pick their next opportunity, their next job. What I've seen is that a lot of people pick salary and title, and then they pick all the other things after that. And in my world, I pick category potential. That is to say, can this be a gigantic new space? The second thing I look at is, can we, whoever the we is, actually design and dominate, do what it takes to design and dominate a new category? And then to your point on the boss, I think the boss sits like just next to those things. Is this a giant new category we can become the category queen of? Is this a company that can actually take 2/3 of the economics? Because we know that's what happens in big new categories, particularly in tech. But the third one in my mind is, and how legendary is your boss?
And
Because
how
it,
much does your boss want you to win? How
very good.
much of
Okay,
a
good.
support will that boss be? And if you're early in your career, I would actually put the boss at the top, because your first job, your second job, you're still very much in learner mode. Even though you've graduated from university or you've graduated from vocational school, you're still learning. And I think that a boss who is willing to teach you, support you, and make sure that you're successful, and understands that if you're successful, the boss will be successful. To me, that is such an important, sponsor early on, who will do wonders for your career. And the fact that you're working for a great category leader is important, but I think that is more of a mid-career kind of decision after your first and second job. Now you don't want to work for companies that go under. You want to work for companies that are going to come and dominate the world.
Yeah. But I love that insight about your boss, because that person has more control, more influence on you than anyone else, particularly early. And, the other thing I hear is, oh, well, I work for so-and-so and they taught me all the things not to do. And while I think there's some value in working for shitty bosses, I certainly have, and I've gotten some value from learning what not to do. I actually think, having worked for shitty bosses and legendary bosses, working for a shitty boss is overrated. In other words, what I learned, one of the legendary bosses I had, by way of example, was this guy named Bob Howe, who was the chief executive of Scient. And he came from Booz Allen. He came from IBM, and he is an extraordinarily just giant IQ points, has very strong core values and good judgment. And I worked for him right after working for a pretty shitty boss. And the difference between the shitty CEO and him as a legendary CEO in terms of what I learned was incalculable.
Yes, absolutely. And a good example is my husband. He had several really amazing bosses. And if you sit back and look at his career, he will say that his bosses made his career. And I do think that a boss, or choosing a partner as well, when you're founding a company, if you decide to go down that route, having a amazing partner who, in fact, is maybe a little stronger than you and can help you is phenomenally valuable.
I don't know if you remember the Microsoft executive in the old days, the guy named Jeff Rakes, but I'll never
I
forget
don't
this.
remember that name.
He was one of the senior guys. He reported to Gates for quite some time, and he actually was the CEO of the Gates Foundation for a while. Anyway, I had met him a couple of times back in the old days, but I remember, it's funny how certain things stick in your mind. Years ago, when there was the government was considering breaking up Microsoft, I read
Yes.
this interview with Rakes, and they were saying they were going to create a platform company and an apps company, and all these things. And the interviewer said to him, "Well, if that were to happen, which company would you go with?" And Jeff said, "Whichever one Bill goes with."
Very good. There you go. There you
So
go.
I also want to ask you, you have an entire chapter called Entering the Men's Room.
Yes.
Can you unpack some of that chapter and why you want to dedicate so much of your book to, quote unquote, entering the men's room?
Well, I almost named the book, There's a Woman in the Men's Room, but I was told that in today's discussions of transgender, and where the bathroom sharing comes in, the book might be misunderstood as to where I was heading. Entering the men's room is, for me, important in two ways. For a lot of women working in technology or working in finance or maybe even some other fields, they might be the only woman in the room. They might be the only woman around, and having the self-confidence. And secondarily, really not using your gender as a exclusionary category is really important. So don't look at yourself as a woman. Look at yourself as the best engineer or the best marketeer or the best, at whatever you do, the best trader on the trading floor. So that, I think, is very important. And the second is I accidentally entered the men's room, and my reaction as to how I felt when I was there and when I stepped out, it wasn't a big deal for me. What I cared about was more the message I was delivering when I walked into that room by accident. I was so focused on the message I was delivering that I didn't even pay attention to what room I was walking into. And that's really important. It's really important to not get overwhelmed by a mistake you make, but focus on what you were trying to do at the moment. And that was to say something.
Now, you talk about male female, quote unquote, networking hacks. And this may sound like a stupid question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Why do you think it's important or it's required to distinguish networking skills amongst men or amongst women and distinguish male female networking hacks?
Well, I think that one thing that I worry about is the polarization of men and women. More men being worried about the fact that they might be accused of sexual harassment or inappropriate behavior, so not wanting to network with women, and vice versa, women feeling like they're uncomfortable, so they're worried about inappropriate behavior by male colleagues, so wanting to spend more time with other women. I think that polarization is bad for both genders, but it's especially damning for women because let's face it, today, still in the business world, most of the men hold the power. So the less we network with them, the worse it is for us. So I do believe, and I worry about it more so today than when even a year ago when I was writing the book. I do worry that we will naturally polarize, and that is really not in the best interests of women wanting to get into the C-suite, wanting to get into boards, wanting to get into positions of power. So the more we can keep the networking cross-gender, the better it'll serve us.
So what do you think that women should do, or what do you have to share with women regarding how they can better network? They can, quote unquote, to use a term in your book, join the men's club. If I was a woman in business, how would you advise me to do that?
Well, I would say, first of all, don't shy away. Put yourself in environments where it is, as long as it's appropriate behavior, as long as there's no predatory behavior on the other side, put yourself in environments, go out to dinner with that guy. Don't make yourself or him feel like that's inappropriate. And you can even upfront say, hey, I'm coming to dinner because I really want to be a better colleague to you, or I want you to be a better colleague to me. The word colleague is a great word to use because it doesn't have any sexual overtones. And usually it's formal enough that if you call someone a colleague, they pretty much understand that you're looking at them as one and not as a potential boyfriend. So your vocabulary can actually communicate your intent. And same thing with coming from a guy, a man who actually wants to help a female colleague or wants to benefit from the female colleague's advances in the workplace, again, can communicate clearly intent. No, this is not a date. No, there's no second thought about what this meeting is. This is strictly a business dinner where we want to get to know each other better and see how we can collaborate. The collaboration is not about collaborating on a romantic level, but collaborating on a business level. And frankly, in my mind, the more you can articulate and put it on the table, the better off you are. Leaving things to innuendo sends people to places they don't want to go, both male and female.
Yeah. Now, look, of course, I have no zero experience being a woman. As a man, I think over time I've learned how to deal with this. I had a situation not that long ago. I was at an event, and I was speaking at the event. And you know what it's like when you go to these events and you speak, and people can treat you. They can put you up on a pedestal. You wrote some
Right.
big ass book. They think you're a big ding dong. Anyway, so during the I spoke during the day, and then we have the cocktail hour, and the typical thing at an event at a conference. And all of a sudden, I notice that I'm having a conversation with two women. We're just having cocktails, and people are coming by and chatting, and and then there's these two women, and I get a sense that one of them might be flirting with me, which is fine. I'm a very friendly guy, and so forth and so on. I don't always wear my wedding ring. I surf and I train martial arts, and so I'm taking it off all the time. At corporate events, I try to be conscious about putting it on. And so in that situation, first of all, as a guy, we have tons of advantages. I'm physically stronger than either one of these women. So and I happen to be a martial artist. So I don't have any physical concern, right?
Right.
And so all I do gently is I just mention my wife a few more times than I might have otherwise. And it's amazing how quickly the flirting stops, and we're sort of back to a more businessy conversation. So I guess my point is, as a guy, I have found simple, easy ways to deal with this. And, most women get the message, and that's the end of it. What I have no experience of course, is and look, I'll be explicit. As a man, I'm not today. I've been retired for a year and a half, but back when I was a CMO and an entrepreneur, I was quote unquote in positions of power. So here's what I don't know. Here's my question. When you're a woman and the physical difference is the opposite of what I experience, and the power dynamic is the opposite of what I had historically as an executive experience, how do you inject yourself in these environments, go out to dinner, want to be a better colleague, do that stuff, and at the same time deal with, let me say, a set of things that I don't think I very often, if ever, have had to deal with, if I could put it that way.
So one of the things that I wanted to say is that what you shared, where you talk about being married multiple times in a conversation and
Yeah.
the women get the message, doesn't happen with men, in the sense that if a woman says, oh, my husband's waiting for me, or I need to go back up to the room and call him, or my husband and I went on a vacation, and mention the husband multiple times, that usually has no bearing on the men who are flirting with her and who might have some plans for interacting with her in ways other than professionally. So my advice to women has always been to be very explicit. Be very explicit in the intent of the relationship. Be very explicit about it being work focused, it being industry focused. And if you're very explicit, usually, and if you do not flirt yourself, if you're very friendly, very open, but flirting is very different than being friendly and open, people get the message. And the other thing that I've learned, and I advocate strongly, is not to engage. So if you're at a conference and someone makes a comment about, how gorgeous you are, and it would be really fun to get to know you outside the work environment, look at them with a blank stare. You don't have to engage. Do not engage. Don't get angry. Don't get upset. Don't get, prudish. Don't engage. Ignore.
Now, I'm
And
curious
that's,
about that,
yes.
because the fighter in me says, turn around, tell him to shut his trap, and if he doesn't, you're going to deck him. But you don't
Well,
advocate that.
I don't advocate that one bit. You know why I don't advocate that? Because what you said earlier in our conversation was that sometimes when people come at you strongly, your intent might be, or your desire might be, to engage even more. So a woman saying a strong no to a man, for some guys, depending on the personality, that might be even a bigger challenge. They might say, wow, I'm going to win this one over because I love the challenge. Not engaging totally takes that out of the equation. You don't engage, there's no challenge, there's nothing, there's no next step.
It is interesting that you say that, because it's clearly the wiser move, and this may be an indicator that I'm getting a little bit wiser here. Just recently, I had an interaction with the CEO, and I had known this CEO from a few years ago, and he did a couple things that, in my book, make him an asshole. And I don't want to have anything to do with any assholes. And so he showed back up in my life, and he actually wanted to get on Legends and Losers, and he wanted to this, and he was acting like he was my best friend, when in point of fact, our last interaction was, let's just call it not a positive one. And he tries to play dumb about it, over email. He's like, hey, I said to him, listen, let's just call him Jimmy. I said, listen, Jimmy, I'm not interested. I'd prefer not to engage. And he comes back with, hey, did I say something? I'm sorry. Like, what is it? And I just think, listen, first of all, you know what it is, you dumb fuck. And if you don't, you're so fucking dumb, I don't want to have anything to do with you anyway. And so I started to write the email to explain to this guy why I didn't want to have anything to do with him. And I thought, there is zero upside to this email. Absolutely
Exactly.
Zero. Because he's just going to think I'm an asshole no matter what I say about his behavior. And so all I responded with was, Jimmy, I wish you well, and I'm just not your guy. And he said, okay, best wishes. And that was it. And so is that what you're talking
Absolutely.
about? Just
That's
leave
exactly
the
what I'm
thing
talking
alone
about.
and let that heat come out of it.
Absolutely. And I think that engaging, actually, had you written that letter or email, you would have gotten even more emotionally committed to whatever your position was. It would have taken time and emotion and energy from you. Why do that?
Yes.
Why waste
When
your
in point
time?
of fact, this guy's an idiot. I could care less about him. I want to spend zero time thinking about him ever again, and just go away.
Exactly. And most people don't like that. It's the cold shoulder. No one likes getting the cold shoulder. Sometimes getting into a fight is a lot more enjoyable than just getting the cold shoulder. So what I'm suggesting is, don't engage, don't get into a fight, don't pursue, positive or negatively, just don't engage. I
No.
learned that as an American, with not very, or as an immigrant to America without great English skills. It kind of happened naturally for me at the very beginning. People would make innuendos and say things, and I would just look, uh, blank. I didn't get it. And oftentimes, especially if they were trying to flirt with me, um, it kind of took all the fun out of it. So they stopped.
Yeah. Now, you have a fascinating chapter on parenting, and you call it guilt and other
Yes.
challenges of working parenting. So, could you kind of open this up for me again? Something that I have no experience of. A, I'm not a parent, and clearly I'm not. You say no mommy guilt, and clearly I'm not a mommy. Other than I am the father to six beautiful hens.
Well, I hope they produce a lot of eggs for you.
They do. Oh, and my wife Carrie will kill me. And two kitty cats.
Oh, that's even more important. I'm a cat person. So I think that is the biggest challenge for women who have kids at home, and they leave the kids every day and go to work, and they feel incredible guilt. And I think that is the most unproductive emotion, period. First of all, I do believe, and deep in my heart, I believe that most women are better at work if they're parents as well, because they learn time management. Parenting teaches a lot. Teaches us to be productive, teaches us to be great time managers, also teaches us wisdom. Dealing with parenting makes us much smarter and wiser, much more efficient. So, actually, the other day I was talking to a guy who runs a law firm, and he said anytime a client complains about their bills being too high, he gives that client to a woman who has kids at home, because he knows that that attorney is going to be so much more efficient than any of the male attorneys. She's going to get her job done so quickly, and that bill is not going to be very high. And so
I
I
love
do
it.
think that being a mother and being a working mother, um, in fact, is a very fulfilling life. It has been for me. So guilt is the worst thing that we can feel because it's completely unproductive. It's not good for the kids. It's not good for us. It's not good for our employer. It's a waste of time.
Well, and there's a couple points about what you're saying that I absolutely love. One of them is in the context of work. For some reason in our world, we don't hear about this very much. But the reality is, most human beings, if you study the data science research around happiness, and I have, indicates very clearly that there is a tremendous amount of self-actualization and self-realization that happens from work. It's a huge part of who human beings are. We have a garden. The satisfaction of, digging a hole, planting a plant, and watching that plant turn into tomatoes. There's a satisfaction that comes with that. I also believe, and I think it's maybe more so for men, it's just my own personal experience, but I think it's true for women too, from what I've seen. The people for whom they become recognized as an expert, or recognized as accomplished, or recognized as a competent, effective, high-level performer in their field, whether they're a carpenter, a professional surfer, or they're Magdalena and everybody in between. If you don't achieve some level of success, that is to say, particularly respect and admiration of your peers in your chosen field, people who don't have that, there's something that's off in their life. That's been my experience. And so I guess my point is, work is such a powerful way in which we express and experience our life. And so people for whom they pull themselves out of that experience. Now, maybe, look, if you want to go be a full-time parent, by all means, go be a full-time parent. But there's something different from a self-actualization and realization point of view that comes from work that doesn't come from parenting. It's hard for me to say that as a non-parent, but that's been my observation. You've experienced both. What do you think?
Well, I would like to close this session with a very personal story about my mother. On this very topic, my mother, who grew up in Istanbul, Turkey, was a fantastic wife, fantastic daughter-in-law, and then later a fantastic mom. She spent her whole life taking care of others, serving others, making others successful. But in very many ways, she was a very unhappy woman. She had sacrificed for others and did not feel that she had very much to show for her own life. At 63 years old, after taking care of my kids, after she had taken care of my sister's kids, and of course us, her own kids, at 63 years old, my mother got her very first job outside the house. She became the barista at a local Whole Foods market in Palo Alto. And I watched my mother blossom from that victim personality of feeling like she had very little to give to life, to the world, to feeling like she was the very best cappuccino maker in the world. And again, didn't matter what her job was. She got so much self-esteem. She walked around Palo Alto as if she owned the place. People greeted her on the streets. She greeted them back because she had become a familiar face. And that joy she got from that work, as well as the validation from her paycheck, was truly transforming to her. So I would love to close on that note that doesn't matter what you plan on doing with your life as a parent. You may postpone working, but there is nothing that child rearing can do as far as validating your skills outside the home. And if you can get the validation outside the home as well, then I think you're going to have a very fulfilled life.
Well, and that, unless you have anything else, that sounds like a wonderful place to close.
I think so too. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Magdalena, thank you so much. I want to thank you for, being an incredible pioneer and inspiration. And thank you for writing this wonderful book. And I know this new startup is going to be absolutely legendary.
Thank you. And the one last thing I want to add is that what's shocking to me and very, very heartwarming is that half the emails and letters I get from readers of Power Up, How Smart Women Win in the New Economy, are actually from men. And they have been saying to me that a lot of the lessons apply to them as well. So it's been a surprise for me. I didn't expect that, but it's been a very pleasant surprise.
Well, you wrote a great book.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Magdalena. Be legendary,
my friend.
Me. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I know I say it a lot. I can't believe I get to have these conversations. Anyway, if you're as blown away by Magdalena as I am, why not email it to somebody who you think would enjoy this conversation? And we'd love it if you'd share it on social media. Your shares and you reviewing the show and you telling people about the show are the way we grow. And the fact that you do it warms the cockles of my whiskey-stained heart. Doesn't that sound like something maybe like a Dickens character might say? Anyway, all right. If you're a Facebook person, you can check us out on Facebook. We have a Facebook group there. If you're on Twitter, I'm at Lochhead, Lochhead, and you can also check out at Legends Losers. And we always love to get email from you. If you want to email us, send it to blackhole@legendsandlosers.com, and we always love your reviews. All right. We would like to thank the book Power Up, How Smart Women Win in the New Economy by our guest today, Magdalena Yesil, Equity Directory, the invite-only network of entrepreneurs and startup talent exchanging work for equity. If you're in the equity ecosystem or the startup ecosystem, check out equitydirectory.com. HarperCollins Instant Classic, Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Learn the new management discipline of category design and pick up a couple hundred copies where you pick up legendary books today. OneLifeFullyLived.org. We're the nonprofit helping you dream, plan, and live your best life. We've got all kinds of incredible resources for you. So wherever you are in your journey and whatever's next for you, we probably have something that'll help at almost as close to free as we can possibly make it. OneLifeFullyLived.org. Our good friends, Positive Marketing in PR, marketing, and category design in London, Europe, and beyond. Check out positivemarketing.com. Verve Coffee Roasters in beautiful Santa Cruz, California, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Tokyo, and always West Coast Artisan Coffee at vervecoffee.com. Our good friends at 800 CEO Read, business books. Why don't you read some? They're good for you. Like Magdalena's book, 1185 Design. There is a reason the most legendary companies get their brands built at 1185 Design. Go check them out, 1185-1185design.com. Secondflightconsultancy.com. Check us out. We're growth hacking your business to whole new heights. This is our good buddy Nick Cullen's business. He's a genius. He's helping us out with a lot of cool stuff coming up here on Legends and Losers, and he and his team of growth hackers will help you do very clever things to take your digital business to a whole new place. Check out secondflightconsultancy.com. A podcast we love, Stop Riding the Pine with the nicest man in podcasting, Jamie J. If you're an entrepreneur, check it out, Stop Riding the Pine. And themarketingjournal.org. This is what legendary marketing people read. Check it out. And our good friends at kiva.org. Microfinance loans making a difference all around the world. Check out kiva.org soon. That's it. We would like to remind you that today's oddcast is the sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network. Now, this oddcast is provided to you solely for informational purposes, and all rights do remain disturbed. We must tell you, and this is not recommended for wankers. In the event of bullshit interview shows, take 2 Legends and Losers and tweet us in the morning. Be nice to your mother. Warning, this oddcast is highly flammable. Support your local venture capitalist. Tell 2 people you love about 2 podcasts you love. Don't be lame. Get out of the passing lane. Don't forget to listen to Leonard Cohen. Hands up, chin down. Teach girls science. Chewing out a rhythm on my bubble gum. The sun is out and I want some. Only buy pasteurized, free-range eggs. Remember to surf naked. And thank you, Candy Dandy. Love you, Mom and Dad. Hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Today, our deepest apologies go to Marcus Rust, CEO of Rose Acre Farms. Sorry, Marcus, we just ran out of time for you. That's it, my friends. Thank you so much for investing part of your life with us. We'll see you again soon on Legends and Losers.